more about the food situation in Gaza. And also, I'm going to bring you one of the, it would be funny if it weren't so dark moments of the New York Times and their just insane propaganda. But it's like they don't even know how hilariously disgusting they appear. Anyway, this is the New York Times saying half of Gazans are at risk of starving. The UN is warning more than 90% of Palestinians in the territory say they have regularly gone without food for a whole day, according to the UN. So 90% of Gazans are unable to actually eat a full amount of meals. I know a lot of you might not find that shocking, but that is horrific. 90% are often not eating for a whole day. And then half of them are at risk of starving to death. Half of the entire, I don't know how many remain in Gaza after all this killing, but I guess still 2.1, 2.2 million. And half of them are at a risk of starving to death. And yet again, what is it? What purpose does that serve? Well, some of them may starve to death, but I think more important than that, it lowers the defenses for fighting a disease. So yet again, Israel can have disease do a lot of the job that they can't do with bombs. This brings an individual whose 4 children have been hungry for weeks. Yeah, I mean, it is, and this is the New York Times. So I can't imagine anyone reading the New York Times, even though they do so much propaganda for Israel, and they've been doing propaganda for Israel for years and years and years. I can't imagine anyone reading about a man and his children and how his children are starving to death and reading that and going, sounds good to me. Sounds fine. Let's keep that going. But all right. So that article was on the front page, and look at what was next to it. This is me tweeting out an image of it. I may be too small for you to read, but anyway, I tweeted, the ongoing genocide by Israel is creating some truly dystopian and surreal corporate media coverage, such as the cover of today's New York Times, featuring a report that half of Gazans are at risk of starving to death. And they feature that report alongside the best cooking recipes for New Year's. There it is. The best, considering of taking up cooking for New Year's, here's your best recipes. I mean, how dystopian do we have to get? How insanely dystopian do we have to get? That you have an article about millions of people starving to death next to an article about here's some great recipes for you in your new year. I mean, it both speaks to what the New York Times is, but it also speaks to what Americans are. And of course, the number one audience for the New York Times is Americans. That so many Americans are just looking the other way while this genocide goes on. So many of us are just lost in the vapid spectacle of consumerism and reality TV. And when I say reality TV, I don't just mean the reality TV shows. I mean our cable news channels. It's all reality TV. It's all people playing a role, acting like who gets into Congress even fucking matters anymore is kind of laughable in this situation. When was the last time that Congress did something for the people of America that did not align with corporate interests? Never, zero, ever. Doesn't happen. So to sit there and have a back and forth about who's in Congress, who's gonna get into Congress, it's all ridiculous. And yet we're just lost in that world. We're lost in that VR. We're lost in that fake fucking nothingness. We're staring at nothingness while the reality is people are dying around the world. And the New York Times knows that that's their audience. So they're going to give them, here's how to cook your cookie, cook it stuff while these people die. Don't forget to cook your things. I mean, just Jesus.